Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you are new here, my name is Lexa, and today we are going to cover all of the basics that you need to know to start investing. Before we get started, if you want to learn how to save money, pay off debt, invest, and how to finally feel more confident with your money, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Also, push that notification bell, that way you get notified every single time that I upload. Now, we have a lot to cover in this episode, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I know personally, whenever I was getting into the personal finance world, budgeting and saving money and paying off debt, while those were a little overwhelming at first, they weren't nearly as scary and overwhelming as the thought of investing was. I always thought that investing wasn't something that I needed to worry about just yet, that I would get the rest of my finances under control, and then maybe later on in the future, I would worry about investing for retirement and all of that stuff, that it was just not worth my time, that it seemed a little bit too overwhelming, and I wanted to get everything else down first. But I am so thankful that I went ahead and just took that first step and started to learn the basics of investing, because when I started to learn the basics, I realized just how important it was that I get started as soon as possible. And I also realized that investing is not nearly, and does not have to be, nearly as scary and overwhelming as I thought that it was. So if you are new to investing, or if you're just wanting to make sure that you have all of the foundational knowledge that you need in order to succeed at being a beginner in investing, you are in the right place. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the steps that you're going to have to take to start investing. The first thing that you need to look at doesn't really actually have anything to do with investing. It has to do with the rest of your personal finances. Your finances don't need to be in perfect order in order for you to start investing, but I do think that it is important that you have that solid foundation. So if you don't have an emergency fund yet, I definitely think that your money is most well spent building up an emergency fund. And if you want to know more about emergency funds, I will go ahead and link my video up here that walks you through how much you need an emergency fund, how to build one, and what they even are. Now, I was actually talking about on my Instagram the other day about how my master's degree is in behavioral psychology. So whenever I'm talking about money, I recognize that there's a huge component of it that is actually more behavioral than it is monetary. And because of this, establishing routines is so important, especially when it comes to investing. Getting in the habit of actually setting aside some of your money to invest, I think, is way more important than the amount that you can invest right now. So this opinion might be a little bit controversial, and definitely do whatever is best for you and whatever makes you feel the most comfortable, but I don't think that you have to be out of credit card debt in order to start investing. I definitely would not recommend putting large chunks of money into investing while you're still in credit card debt or any other high interest debt, because obviously you're losing a lot of money to interest. But I think getting in that routine of investing as soon as possible is invaluable in the long run. A lot of times, us as humans, we will put things off and put things off, especially if they are new and they're overwhelming and they're scary. And the sooner that you just take that first step, realize how easy investing is, and get into that routine of things, the better off you're gonna be in the long run. Even if that means setting aside $10, $25, $50 a month, even when you're in credit card debt, just to get into that routine of putting that money into an investment account, I think over the long run is priceless. Now, that is just my opinion. Of course, you're going to want to do whatever is best for you, but if you are someone who is worried that you shouldn't be investing whenever you're in credit card debt and that you're losing all of this money, instead, don't think about it as what money you are losing right now. Look at your future self as well and decide whether you think that it is more important for you to just start establishing that routine and then building up in the long run, or if you want to go ahead and just focus on paying off your debt right now and save investing for the future. But personally, I started investing when I was in credit card debt, and I am honestly so thankful that I did, because I don't think if I hadn't taken that first step that I would be where I am at in the investing process. Okay, so we've covered some of the back end about your own personal finance and what you need to know about that before you get into investing. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of those investing terms that you're just gonna need to know in order to start getting into this world of investing. Now, I promise I will make this as down-to-earth and easy to understand as possible. We're not going to go over super in-depth concepts. I just want you to know the basic investing terms. That way you kind of understand once you start to get into this investing world what everyone is talking about. So if you've been on my channel for a while, or if you've checked out all of my other social media, you might have heard me use this term tax advantage. I talk about this a lot whenever we talk about investing. And tax advantage just means that it is some sort of an investment that is either tax deferred, tax exempt, or just has some sort of a tax benefit to it. It's important to recognize whether you are working with a tax advantaged account because you want to know and take advantage of any extra money you're going to get by saving money on taxes. So some examples of tax advantage accounts include IRAs and 401ks or 403bs. Now, I will never understand why they chose to make such important investing terms sound the most boring and complicated that they possibly could, but I promise you they are not boring and they do not have to be complicated. So let's go ahead and start off by talking about 401ks or 403bs. So both of these are pretty much the exact same thing. 401ks are offered through for-profit companies, whereas 403bs are offered through non-profit companies. But basically, they're the same thing. So for the purposes of trying to not overcomplicate everything in this video, I'm going to refer to them as 401ks, but also know that if you work for a nonprofit who offers a 403b, most of this is going to apply to you as well. So a 401k is a tax advantaged account that is offered through your employer. Now, in a 401k, your investment comes directly from your paycheck, and also your employer might offer something called a 401k match. Now, a 401k match is something where your employer says, if you contribute blank amount every month or every paycheck, we will go ahead and match that contribution up to a certain amount. So an example of this might be, we can take my job for example. If I invest 6% of my paycheck every single month into my 401k account, my employer will match that up to 2%. So they will put an extra 2% of my paycheck into that investment account for me. Now, this is a huge benefit. So if you know that you have this and you're not taking advantage of it, or if you're wondering if this is an option for you, definitely reach out to your HR department and ask them if there is a 401k match and ask them if you are taking advantage of it. Now, when I talk about tax advantaged accounts, I also mentioned something called an IRA. And an IRA stands for an individual retirement account. Sometimes it's also referred to as an individual retirement arrangement, but for our purposes, it's the same thing. Now, an IRA is another form of a tax advantaged account, just like a 401k, meaning that you get some sort of a tax break or a tax benefit from it. The difference is that an IRA is completely separate from your employer. This means that payments towards your IRA don't automatically come out of your paycheck, and your employer doesn't offer any sort of a match into an IRA. Okay, so how are we doing? We have tax advantaged accounts up here, and then we have 401ks and IRAs underneath that umbrella. Now, underneath the umbrella of 401ks and IRAs, there are some other umbrellas, and those are Roth versus a traditional account. So a traditional tax advantaged account means that you get your tax benefit now, meaning that whatever you are putting into either your 401k or your IRA, you get to deduct from your taxes this tax year. So basically, the big benefit here is that you pay less in taxes. So let me give you an example of what that might look like. If I have a traditional 401k and I make, just for math's sake to make this easy, $10,000 a year, and I have chose to put 10% of my income into my traditional 401k. That means that when the whole year is done, I have put $1,000 into that traditional 401k, which means that even though I made $10,000 that year, since I put $1,000 into the 401k, I am taxed as if I only made $9,000. So therefore, I am overall paying less in taxes. So both a traditional 401k and a traditional IRA mean that you save money on taxes now. So a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA is the opposite of that. A Roth account is still a tax advantaged account because you are getting a tax benefit, but rather than getting your tax benefit now, you get your tax benefit in the future. So let's go back to our easy money example of, let's say I made $10,000 this year and I decided to contribute $1,000 of that into a Roth IRA. I am still going to be taxed as if I made $10,000 this year. So that $1,000 that's going into my Roth IRA has already been taxed. And the government keeps track of that. So they know that any money inside of a Roth account, you've already paid taxes for. So 30 years down the road, whenever you retire and it's time for you to start taking money out of your retirement account, you get to take that money out tax-free. So you might be wondering, why would I wait 30 years to get that tax advantage when I could have that tax advantage right now? Well, the added benefit to a Roth account is that you get that $1,000 tax-free whenever you take that out of your account at retirement age, whether that is 30, 40, 20, 10 years from now. But you also get to take all of the growth on that money tax-free. So if that $1,000 actually turned into $10,000, you get $10,000 completely tax-free. So you might be wondering, okay, that sounds awesome, but how in the hell is my $1,000 supposed to turn into $10,000? That is where the power of compound interest comes in. So if you heard anything about investing, you've probably heard this term compound interest thrown around a lot. So what does that even mean? Compound interest means that you are not only making interest or making money on the money that you have inside of that account, you are also making interest on the money that your money is making. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's do an example of $100 and 1% interest. So with simple interest, if you had this $100 at 1%, every single year you would earn $1 on that $100. So here's what it looked like on year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, etc. You can see on this example that every single year you're only making $1. However, with compound interest, you still have that $100 and 1% interest, but instead, year 1, you earn $1, which turns your total into $101. But on year 2, you would earn $1 and 1 penny. Now you might be thinking, Lexa, it's a penny over the course of a year. Why are you so excited about this? What difference does this make? And you're right, when I throw up the difference between a few years with simple interest and a few years with compound interest with our $100 at 1%, it doesn't really look like much. However, when I throw up this, you can really start to see that once your money starts to grow, compound interest makes a huge difference. And the reason that people get so excited about investing is because compound interest is at play. So basically, you're earning interest on your interest. So now we've talked about the fact that inside of a tax-advantaged account, such as a Roth 401k or a traditional IRA, you are earning compound interest. But how does this happen? I'm gonna be honest with you, it's very technical. Okay, so we're just gonna break it down into simpler things that you just kind of need to know to get started. So what is super important to understand and what most people kind of miss is that your tax-advantaged account needs investments in order for you to start building compound interest. So I don't know if you've ever been there before, but sometimes what will happen is people will throw $1,000 into an IRA and then a few years later they come back and they're like, what happened? This still only has $1,000 in it. And the reason is because they didn't make any investments inside of that account. So what kind of investments can you make inside of these accounts so your money can start making you more money? Now, to be perfectly honest with you, there are tons of investments that you can make. And if I sat here all day trying to break down all of them for you, you would get bored and leave. I would get bored and leave. So instead, we're just gonna focus on 3 different types, which are generally speaking the most popular and the ones that you're probably gonna hear a lot about. The first one, and one of the most popular ones, are stocks. Stocks, the stock market, seems so cool, so sexy, so thrilling. But what are stocks? So basically speaking, buying a stock in a company means that you are buying an itty bitty little portion of that company. So if you own a stock in Apple, congratulations, you are kind of technically like part little tiny bit owner of Apple. But while stocks can seem really cool and really fun to invest in, they do pose increased risk. Because if you invest all of your money into Apple and then one day suddenly Android takes over the entire world and Apple crashes, you've got no money because you went ahead and put all of your eggs in one basket. So how do you lessen your risk? How do you start to diversify your money? That is where index funds or ETFs come in. Now, there is a difference between index funds and ETFs, and I definitely encourage you to go ahead and do your own research into that. But for our purposes, I'm going to talk about them kind of as like one and the same. So index funds and ETFs are basically a group of a bunch of stocks that are supposed to mirror or represent the thing that they are claiming to represent. So let me go ahead and give you an example to make this a little bit easier. An index fund that follows the S&P 500, which is the top 500 publicly traded companies, is designed to match the actual S&P 500. So if the S&P 500 raises by 7% today, the index fund following the S&P 500 is designed to also raise 7%. Now, the reason that this helps to minimize your risk is because putting money inside of index funds is basically like putting in one egg inside of a bunch of baskets rather than all of your eggs into one individual basket. Therefore, if Apple suddenly crashes in our utopia of androids and no longer exists, you are okay because you only had one egg inside of Apple and you still have a bunch of other eggs inside of a bunch of other companies. So if you're someone who is worried about the risk of investing and you are worried about putting your money inside of an investment account because you're afraid you're going to lose it all, index funds and ETFs are your friend. I also really love index funds because they have low fees. The third thing that you can invest in that we're going to talk about are mutual funds. Now, I am going to be straightforward right off the bat and say mutual funds are not my cup of tea. However, I wanted to make sure that you kind of understood what the difference is between mutual funds, index funds, and stocks. That way you can make a decision that best suits you. While index funds are designed to match the market that they're mirroring, mutual funds are designed to hopefully outperform that market. So you might be thinking, Lexa, that sounds great. Why would you not want a mutual fund when it's designed to outperform the market and go for index funds which just match the market instead? Why is that bad? I'm here to tell you. So while yes, mutual funds are designed to outperform the market by being more actively managed by a professional, there is a cost to that, and that cost are higher fees. And while minimal fees might not seem like they make that much of a difference, because of our friend that we were talking about earlier, compound interest, little small fees can make a huge difference over the long run. And generally speaking, index fund performance over time tend to be more predictable than actively managed mutual funds performances. So while yes, sometimes they might outperform the index funds, sometimes they might not. And I would rather take the low cost predictable route than the one that costs more and is less predictable. Hey guys, Editing Lexa here. I just wanted to throw this up to give you a little bit more information about fees and stuff like that with mutual funds and how they perform. I'll also leave some stuff down below for you to do your own research. Okay guys, we talked about tax advantaged accounts, Roth IRAs, traditional 401ks, investments inside of those accounts so that you can earn compound interest. Whew! Hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully I didn't bore you. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you and this is all making sense. So now that we have talked about all of these terms that you need to know, let's talk about the actual concrete steps for you to open an investment account. This is the fun part, guys. I'm so excited. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing, number one, that you need to do is decide what kind of account you are going to open up. So how do you decide which ones to open? The number one thing that you need to know is whether you have a 401k match, because like we talked about earlier, 401k matches are free money, so you need to be taking advantage of that. If you don't have a 401k and you don't have a 401k match, an IRA is probably the way to go. So you need to decide whether a traditional or a Roth IRA is best for you. Now, personally, I chose to open up a Roth IRA because I expect that right now I am in a lower tax bracket than I will be in the future. Therefore, I'd rather spend the money on taxes now and then be able to take all of that money and its growth out of that account at retirement tax-free. But of course, there are also benefits to opening up a traditional account as well, including the fact that if you do think that right now you're at a higher tax bracket, you could pay less in taxes by paying in the future, and by saving money on taxes now, that gives you, in theory, more money for you to also invest so it can start making you even more money. Another thing to consider when you are deciding which account to open up is to know the contribution limits. So right now, sitting here as we speak, the contribution limit for 401ks and 403bs is $19,500 a year. This means that you can put up to that amount into this account with the tax advantage every single year. With Roth and traditional IRAs, currently the contribution limit is $6,000 a year. Now, both of these increase a little bit if you're 50 years or older, so definitely make sure to Google it to get the most up-to-date information. Once you decide what account that you're going to open up, it is important to know what brokerage that you're going to use. A brokerage account is similar to a bank account, except it gives you access to the stock market, index funds, ETFs, all that jazz. So I will list here a bunch of different examples of brokerages that you can use, but personally, my favorite and the one that I use is M1 Finance. In my opinion, they're one of the most intuitive, they have low fees, I like their whole platform, so that's the one that I use. And if you want to know step-by-step how to open up an account with M1 Finance, wait until the end because I am going to show you guys that as well. So you've picked your account, you've picked your brokerage, now you have to pick your investments. Remember those investments? We were talking about them earlier. Things like stocks, index funds, mutual funds, ETFs, all that jazz. Now, going into all of these, the differences between them, what your options are, could be a whole video or multiple videos in and of itself. So definitely make sure that you do your research to know what you are investing in. But I will give you a tip on somewhere that is a good place to start for most people who are beginning to invest, and that is target date funds. Target date funds are designed to be more of a hands-off, diversified approach to investing specifically for retirement. So you put in usually the year that you plan on retiring or around that year, and then also your risk tolerance. So whether you have a conservative, moderate, or aggressive risk tolerance. And picking that target date fund is designed to include tons of different bonds, ETFs, index funds, individual stocks, tons of stuff that you don't have to manage. It does its own thing. It figures it out for you, and it is designed to be more aggressive now and then slowly start to be more conservative as you get closer to retirement to mitigate your risks. And I'll show you more about opening up a target date fund in M1 Finance here at the end of the video. But M1 Finance is not the only one that offers these. Vanguard has target date funds. Tons of other brokerages do as well. So definitely look into see if that is an option. Okay, so you have your account all set up, and now all that is left to do is fund that account. Now, a lot of times brokerages will have a minimum amount that you need in order to open up one of these accounts. So if you don't already have this, usually it's something like $500 or $1,000. Don't be worried, don't get discouraged. Just set up a savings goal inside of your high yield savings account to start working up to having that money so that you can open up your account. When I first got started, I didn't have enough money to open up one either. I had to save up for a little bit as well, but it was totally worth it. So make sure that you know your brokerage's minimum. That way you can start saving for that if you don't have that money available to you already. Now, speaking of that, one of the reasons that I initially chose M1 Finance, I was actually super beginner. I didn't know a ton about investing, but I chose that over Vanguard because Vanguard required $1,000 to open up a Roth IRA and M1 Finance only required $500. So anyway, that's how I ended up on M1 Finance, but then come to find out, the more I learned about investing, the more awesome I realized that the platform was, and I am so glad that I chose it. So if you want to see a walkthrough on how to open up an M1 Finance account, let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing that you're going to want to do is go to m1finance.com and create an account, so log in or push get started. From here, you'll create an account. I already have one made, so I'm going to go ahead and log into that. And then this screen will pop up so you can select the account that you want to open. So I actually already have both a traditional and a Roth IRA through M1 Finance, so I can't open up another one of those. But if you are wanting to open up a tax advantaged account, definitely choose one of these options, whichever one works best for you. But I'm going to go ahead and click the individual investment account just so I can walk you guys through the rest of the steps. Once you open up your account, it's going to look something like this. It's going to say build your portfolio. You have browse your pies, browse expert pies, or search securities. Now, speaking of those target date funds that I was talking about earlier, that is going to be over here in the expert pies. So if you click view pies, it gives you all of these options. A lot of people ask me if they have options for ethical investing, and they do. They have some responsible investing here. They have stocks and bonds, hedge fund followers, general investing, but the real money piece is right here, plan for retirement. So if you click view pies, these are their version of a target date fund. So over here, you will see the year. In this case, it says 2020, and then it says aggressive, conservative, or moderate. So this is the year that you plan on retiring, or around the year you plan on retiring. So for example, if I planned on retiring in 30 years, and I decided that I wanted to do the moderate risk tolerance, that would be 2055, moderate. And if I click here, it's gonna walk me through what the dividends are here, how many different things I'm investing in, what the expense ratio is. And then if you scroll down, it'll show you every single little thing that you are invested in. So you're never in the dark. You can go through and see what is inside of this expert pie. So you can see in here, it's a bunch of different ETFs, index funds, and bonds. So once you decide on whether you want a target date fund or if you want to make your own, you're going to go ahead and click add to basket. Since I just want to do this one target date fund, I am just going to go ahead and click add, change this. Let's say I opened up a Roth IRA and click save. So here we are. Now we have our whole thing set up in M1 Finance. The only other things that I need to do are connect my bank and then make my first initial deposit to start investing inside of this account. And I am super excited right now because M1 Finance is running a deal where if you sign up and you deposit $100 or $500 into an IRA, you will get an extra $30 to invest. Normally it's an extra $10, so I'm super excited that they're doing this limited time deal. So if you want to take advantage of that and you want that extra $30, I will leave my link in the description bar.